Hello everyone. Today I want to share with you how I learned about blind retrieves. Have you ever wondered how a dog goes out and picks up a bird it never did see fall? Back years ago, I decided that I wanted to get a dog for waterfowl and upland hunting. And doing my research, I kind of narrowed it down that I wanted to get a Labrador Retriever. And I knew at the time that I also wanted a dog that was from very good breeding, that the parents and the grandparents preferably were hunted. And, at the time, I knew that I wanted either a black or a chocolate because where I was going to be hunting, those were the colors that were a little bit easier to camouflage for me at the time. If you waterfowl hunt, you'll understand what I'm saying when it comes to that. Now, trust me, I've had plenty of yellow labs since then, and they have been great dogs, and they've been easy to camouflage in certain areas that I was hunt. But at the time, I had it in my mind that black or chocolate was what I needed. As I started doing my research, it didn't take long for me to find out that I actually had a coworker. He and his brother had a planned litter. They had a planned breeding. They had a litter. And if everything worked according to the time frame, if the breeding took, if the puppies were whelped and everybody was healthy, when the puppy would be ready to go home, it was going to fit into my schedule perfectly. So I went ahead and I talked to them a little bit more. We did a Q&A. They asked me what I was going to use the pup for. I told them, I said, it's going to be a hunting companion. Of course, it's going to be my buddy, family dog, but at the same time, I was going to use it for waterfowl and for upland hunting. So during the time that I was going to have to wait before I get the pup, I really started taking the time when I could to talk to my coworker about what did I need to do as far as preparing the dog for, what kind of training did I need to do, what kind of preparation, because at that time in my life, I was very familiar with hounds. I was very familiar with pointing breeds because I had helped people with their pointers and their setters up to this point. And it's like, well, really what you have a lot of knowledge that's going to work with the lab pup that you're getting. He said, but now when it comes to waterfowl hunting, one of the things that I learned a long time with my dog was it's really important to learn how to teach and train your dog to run a blind retrieve. And I'm kind of like, a blind retrieve? What exactly is a blind retrieve? He said a blind retrieve is basically a retrieve a dog will do if it didn't see the bird go down. The handler, the owner, will send the dog out on a verbal command and use whistle and hand signals and verbal commands to get the dog to the bird, and the dog picks it up and he brings it back. I'm like, well, great. You can show me how to do that because of your dog. He said, well, unfortunately, I never had anyone to show me how to do that. So what I do is before we go out, sometimes I'll get rocks, put them in a pocket or put them in a bag, or sometimes I'll take me a wrist rocket with some rocks and flip them out there. And I was like, yeah, I really don't know if I want to do that. I used to do that as a kid, trying to get beagle pups to, if you jump a rabbit up, I'd throw rocks over into the cover to get them in there to, smell the rabbit and go from there. I said, but I really don't want to be sitting in a boat or a duck blind throwing rocks out. I said, because in my mind, if you have ducks coming in and you're out there throwing rocks, wouldn't that be a big distraction? I said, wouldn't it be better if you did it the way that you talk about? And I said, also, even though I don't know anything about a blind retrieve, that part was new to me. I remember as a kid, when I was about 9 years old, I was at a local swimming hole on a river not too far away. And there were a group of people there, and a young man had a lab. I said young man. At the time, the guy was in his 20s. And I said, I remember seeing him send his dog out into the river. He blew the whistle when the dog got into some still water. Then he gave the dog a cast. He put his hand up, and the dog turned around and went up on the adjacent sandbar, picked up this thing that they call a bumper, which I found out later on is what you put on the side of the boat to protect your boat against a dock. So they call them bumpers, which ironically I use a lot of those for training now, don't we, bud? So anyway, and the dog came back. I said, that was the coolest thing in the world. I said, and I went up and introduced myself and told him I liked seeing that. And we just had a small talk, but that was it. I never see the guy anymore. Anytime we went back, I said, I've never seen anyone else do that. That was a cool thing. He said, well, that was a blind retrieve. And he said, no one has ever really taught me. I just do the whole rock thing. He said, but, you know, I've been hunting enough. I've seen people do that, but no one has ever really sat down and told me how to get a dog to do that. So after we had that conversation, now that was something that just really was stuck in my mind. I need to learn how to do this. Well, as time went along, I kept trying to look through magazines. You know, when I had time, I would try to, you know, talk to people about how to do that. And people just kind of didn't know really what to tell me. Took delivery of pup, immediately started working with the puppy. It didn't take long for me to teach the pup to be steady, to sit. I was taking wings off of game birds, throwing them out for him to go and retrieve, doing a little tracking. I would even throw it in a cover, send a puppy in, tell him hunt it up. That was working out. And I was like, well, we're going pretty good. Then we got into the pup's first hunting season. Now I want you to be mindful. I still had not learned or really got into running a blind retrieve with a dog yet. I didn't know the fundamentals of it. Well, the first hunting season we had, it went quite well. And when it was said and done, we never had any birds that ever had to be retrieved where the pup never saw it go down. Actually, my first hunting season, we spent a lot of time just going out, quote unquote, hunting. I think for the whole hunting season, I may have taken a total of 4 birds. So that was a big trial and error season for me. I learned a lot. And it was just that particular hunting season here in Georgia just was not productive. Not many people I knew actually had successful hunts. So really, I don't think I was really doing anything wrong. It just didn't work. So after that hunting season, I became more and more serious about getting a dog to run a blind retrieve. So I started digging into the magazines that I had, and I had this one publication I had come across, and it had an article in there about retriever clubs. Now, this was before the internet. This was before iPhones, all this. So I was able to, and since my dog was AKC registered, I called the AKC headquarters, and I asked them, I said, is there a retriever club in my state? So the customer service rep on the other side of the phone gave me a name and number. So I reached out and called them, and I asked them, is there anyone in my area that I could talk to? So they gave me a couple of people they knew that were close to me and gave me their phone number. And they said, if you call them, please let them know that I gave them their phone number. And I was like, hey, that's great. I need help or I need some advice. So I reached out to a couple of guys that you could consider part-time professional trainers. They had other things they did from a vocational standpoint, but they also charged a small fee to train other people's dogs. So I started talking to them about how do you get a dog to run a blind retrieve. And some of them had some dogs that were very impressive in running a blind retrieve. And one guy told me, he said, well, Todd, this is what you need to do. Have you force-fetched your dog? I said, well, yeah, I force-fetched him, but not in the sense of using really harsh ear pinch correction. I said, I use a little bit more of a positive method that I learned how to do with especially English setters when I was growing up, because they tend to be more sensitive. And even the Brittany's that I helped people with when I was a kid, they tend to be more sensitive. So I kind of used a little bit more of a positive approach. Well, the guy kind of laughed at me. He's like, no, you've got to really dig into their ear. You got to make them do this, that, and the other. And I was like, well, okay. I wasn't going to argue with him. I wasn't going to debate. So anyway, I said, well, can you just show me the fundamentals of it and I'll figure it out for myself? So basically, he took me out with the dog. He showed me how to go from what he did, the ear pinch. But what really resonated with me, because I was already teaching a dog to fetch in a different way, but using positive reinforcement. Now it's referred to as a British way, and I can talk about that later on. But I was able to get the pups, my dog, of course, he's already fetching out of my hand, he's fetching off the ground, but we started doing walking fetch, where he's picking up bumpers, walk up fetch, he pick it up, stuff like that. Then I started doing pile work, And at the same time, I was teaching him how to sit on the whistle. So then I started working into, some people call it baseball, where you teach them to go to the pile and then they meet you at the pitcher's mound. And then you cast them over, you cast them back. So I was implementing that. And then once we started doing that pretty good, then I knew that it was time to move to another phase. I talked to a couple of the dog trainers, and they really were not giving me anything more than what that first trainer gave me. About that time, someone had mentioned to me about a book that had come out about training retrievers, because still at this time, I really like training dogs what I considered the old way of, because I was more of a hunter instead of running retriever tests and field trials. Nothing wrong with that, and actually I kind of got into that for a little bit, for about 10 years, and I felt like I did quite well, but back, I still, everything for me was Gundogs. That was my thing. So the book that a fellow told me about was Training Retrievers, the Cotton Pershall Method by Bobby N. George. Now, if I said Cotton's last name incorrectly, please forgive me, but that's what I've said for decades and nobody's ever questioned it. So when I got that book and I started looking at it, I realized that Cotton Pershall was the guy that trained King Buck. He was also the guy that won national championships in the retriever events when they were still very much like the British field trials, of where they take them out and they're actually working them on real birds. The biggest thing was sending a dog out on a blind retrieve and hunting down a cripple. That was more of what I was looking for compared to what I had been introduced to in regards to other trainers. Like I said, again, I'm reiterating this, there's nothing wrong with tests and trials, but again, I was more of a hunting companion gun dog guy. So when I got that book, I started reading it, and I literally digested that book. I probably read that thing 4 times. And as I started seeing those methods in there, I started implementing those in the training with my dog. And even though the dog that I had at the time, that was ironic, is when you took that dog hunting, or even when, and then I started being invited out for plantation shoots, the corporate shoots and stuff like that, that dog was all business when it came to hunting. But when it came to training, he just wasn't keen on the training. He wasn't big, not like this guy right here. This one here loves hunting, but he loves training too. I'm not sure what we are keyed in on right now, but sure looks pretty, him looking up there, right? So as I digested that book, implemented everything in the book to my dog on a daily basis, because at the time, this was right before I actually was asked by other people to start training their dogs. I had a job that afforded me the schedule of where I worked at night. I sacrificed a lot of sleep at the time. I was able to work at night, but work with my dog in the daytime, and I was able to do that for years, and able to do other stuff too. But the book really made a difference for me as far as putting together what I had already been shown, and then start implementing that to develop my own training program. So as I got into that next hunting season, I had actually had my retriever at that time. He was actually he and I were performing really good blind retrieves. I was encouraged by a couple of other guys to go and participate at some hunt tests. So I went to some HRC hunt tests. I participated in the started. We went through that pretty easy because those just marks. I did a couple of seasons with him. I think like 4 of them. We got the title in that with him. And the one thing that I thought was interesting, I was invited to go and participate in a NARA. And at one time, the North American Hunting Retriever Association was still somewhat big in the area. So I went to one of their hunt tests. And the thing that I noticed at the top level, and I can't remember if they called it master, senior, or what, because it's been so long ago. The one thing I noticed about their top level when it came to a blind retrieve is there was the water test. They literally told people that this is the way, the bird is over here, but you have a lot of hazards here. We want to send your dog out 40 yards this way. Then when it gets to this point, and I can't remember at the time, I think it was marked by like I don't know, a tree or something out in the water. But when you got to that point, then you had to literally blow your whistle again, cast the dog away to another point over here, and I think there's like a stump over there. Then you cast your dog back to get to the bird. And after you pick the bird up, we want you to walk down the bank with one of the judges. The dog will deliver the bird at hand. The bird you hand to the judge. You will be dismissed at this point. The judge brings the bird back. We go with another dog and do that over again. Now, of course, there were some marks they did over here, but they did the blind like that. And after that was all said and done, I approached the judges. I was not participating in that, but I was observing. I asked the judges, I was like, well, why did you guys do that? And they said, well, let me ask you this. Have you ever hunted anywhere of where you have like certain hazards and you've got to send a dog out and cast them away from those hazards to keep them safe and this, that, and the other? I was like, well, no, not really. That's most of the hunting I've had right now. I said, yeah, I hunt some beaver swamps. I said, but for the most part, most of those are open. And I said, I know where their hazards are at because I've hunted them, I grew up, we used to fish in them and stuff like that, so I knew where the hazards are at. I said, the only other hazards I have is when I hunt on a couple of lakes that I have access to or public access. And I said, I always make sure that I've got side cutters and needle nose pliers in case a dog unfortunately gets a lure stuck in him. And they said, well, at some point in time, you may get the luxury of hunting a place of where you may have to cast and handle a dog around certain hazards. It's going to be great hunting, but you have to work with a dog around that. Well, that made a lot of sense. The thing that was interesting was the following hunting season, I was talking about my coworker earlier who I got my dog from. He was able to get on a hunting club mainly for deer, but it had a phenomenal quote unquote wood duck swamp on it. There was a creek that went through the place and the beavers were damming it up. And we went over there to scout and look at it. The unfortunate thing was back in the earlier days of the farm that this was on, the farmer put a barbed wire fence down close to the creek. No big deal. I mean, that's what you do, cows get water. Nobody was ever anticipating that the property down below him, that beavers were going to back the creek up and then it flooded the whole area. So the farmer couldn't do anything about that. He asked his neighbors to keep the beavers away and he never would, so he had to deal with it. So he had to redo his fence. Well, we were given permission to go down there duck hunt as long as it didn't interfere with deer season or anything else. And this was back in Georgia when we had a break in December. And of course, after deer season, we were able to hunt in January. And I'll finish this up with this. The second hunt we went hunting down there, we had some birds come in working phenomenally. And this was great because I had been practicing duck calling for a long time. And with the ducks that were coming into the swamp, and there were a lot of other reasons why ducks were coming to the swamp. It didn't have anybody to do with baiting. It ran into a river, which immediately ran into one of the big lakes we have on the Georgia-South Carolina line. So ducks were just filtering up through there, and it was great. Trust me, it was great hunting. But we downed some ducks one time, and what was interesting is where the barbed wire fence was at, I knew that it was not a problem for me to send my dog out to retrieve birds on the property adjacent to us because you have permission to go and get down game as long as we were not hunting over there. And we made sure that we were 50 yards, but sometimes you can hit a bird and it can just fall way over. Well, when I went down to the fence, I got looking and I noticed that over a period of time that there were some trees and stuff that fell across the fence. So I went down and made sure, and interestingly, the barbed wire was missing. I mean, I took sticks, dug down, stuff like that, never found a hazard for my dog. So I knew if we ever had this, and then I cast my dog out, was able to pick those birds up. I told my buddy, said, if we ever knock birds in, if they go down over there, of course, we didn't want to shoot on the line or shoot birds on somebody else's property. You'll understand what I'm saying. If ever needed, I could always cast the dog. And I think it was like the last day of that particular hunting season, we had another bird to go down. So this time I was able to stay in my blind, cue the dog in on dead bird, back. Yeah, we know what that means. Cast the dog out. He went out, and I was able to, through verbal, hand and whistle commands, get him to go through that split on the fence go down and then cast him where I needed him to go to get that bird, cast him back over to a straight line and bring you back in. So everything that went into the year before, what I was told about blind retrieves, if you ever need it, actually came to be. So I was able to do that with my dog. And I had one of those, it was one of those defining moments that everything came together. Fortunately, I had a dog that was a team player, even though he was not keen on training. He performed phenomenally well in hunts. And it got to the point of where I never did really participate with him in hunt tests anymore because of the training factor, and he liked hunting. But yeah, learning how to run the blind retrieves, the thing I have interesting is what I learned back in those early days and how I built upon it. I have helped clients and even my own dogs. I have probably trained over thousands of dogs to do that. Not only with Labradors and Goldens and Chesapeakes, but also I've done that with Deutsch Rotthaars, German Wirehairs, German Shorthairs, a few Vieselas, a few Weimaraners. So I've done that with a variety of dogs, and it just brings a lot of satisfaction to get a dog from doing that drill work initially as a puppy and building upon that to get them to put them into real world experience. This buddy, my little buddy here, Indy, sorry. He's actually been doing the drill work ever since he was as young as 4.5, 5 months old. Of course, it wasn't, as efficient as it is now. But yeah, we've come a long way. The core lesson about blind retrieves involves communication, trust, and teamwork. If you get those three working together, your dog will be able to perform as you want. So I know this has been a long story. Hopefully what I've shared with you can help you with your blind retrieves. If you would, if you have any cool hunting stories that involved a blind retrieve, put those in a comment. I'd love to hear them. And if you ever need any help, reach out to me. I'll be glad to share with you what I know. If we ever need to work out any training consultations, we can talk about that. My name is Todd Harvey. This is Disciplined Way. Thank you for watching. If you would give me a subscribe and a like, I would greatly appreciate it. And y'all take care and have a blessed day. Thank you.